Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Siddharth Bharadwaj. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. Reserve Bank of India holds repo rate at 5.5% for second consecutive time, projects lower headline inflation in June to 2.6% following next-gen GST reforms. India's free trade deal with the European Free Trade Association effective from today. Deal signed last year promises $100 billion investment over 15 years, projected to create 1 million jobs in India. US government begins shutdown of most operations after Congress fails to advance funding bill. Trump earlier warned Democrats of irreversible actions.
They are shutting it down. We're not shutting it down. We don't want it to shut down because we have the greatest period of time ever.
And India kicks off their Women's World Cup campaign with a 59-run victory over Sri Lanka in a rain-shortened match in Guwahati. The Reserve Bank of India has announced its monetary policy decision today, highlighting India's favorable growth inflation dynamics. The Reserve Bank of India has kept the repo rate unchanged at 5.5% and maintained a neutral monetary policy stance. This is the second consecutive time that the repo rates have been kept unchanged.
A detailed assessment of the evolving macroeconomic conditions and the outlook, the MPC voted unanimously to keep the policy repo rate unchanged at 5.5%. Consequently, the STF rate remains at 5.25%, while the MSF rate and the bank rate remain at 5.7%.
RBI Governor noted that inflation conditions have remained mild during 2025-26 so far and said that the inflation projection has been revised to 2.6% from earlier projected inflation rate of 3.1% in August.
The average headline inflation for this year has been consequently revised lower from 3.7%, which was projected in June, 3.1% in August, to now 2.6%. Headline inflation for Q4 this year and Q1 next year too have been revised downwards and are broadly aligned with the target despite unfavorable base effects.
RBI Governor highlighted that India's GDP is now projected to grow at 6.8%, up from earlier forecast of 6.5%, reflecting stronger economic momentum supported by robust domestic demand and favorable policy measures.
Real GDP growth for this year is now projected at 6.8%. This is a revision from our earlier forecast of 6.5%. Q2 now is projected at 7%. Q3 at 6.4%, Q4 at 6.2%. Real GDP growth for Q1 next year is projected at 6.4%. The risks are evenly balanced.
Let's take a look at the highlights of decisions made by RBI Monetary Policy Committee now. In a major policy decisions, repo rate changed at 5.5%. Standard deposit facility unchanged at 5.25%. Marginal standing facility rates remain unchanged at 5.75%. RBI Governor Sanjay Malhotra said inflation outlook turned even more benign in recent months. RBI has lowered average headline inflation projection for FY26 to 2.6% from earlier 3.1%. Inflation lowered due to sharp decline in food prices and GST cuts drive major cool down. RBI reiterates its commitment to managing liquidity to ensure credit flow to productive sectors. FY26 inflation will also benefit from favorable base effects and supply side easing. RBI's primary mandate is to keep CPI-based retail inflation at 4%. GDP growth forecast for FY26 from 6.8% up from 6.5%. RBI is closely monitoring rupee movements. Net FDI inflows reached a 38-month high in July. Today marks a new chapter in India's diplomacy. The much-awaited free trade agreement between India and the four-nation European bloc EFTA has come into force. The deal, signed last year, promises major investment, job creation and greater market access. Our correspondent Akhilesh Suman has the details.
The Trade and Economic Partnership Agreement, TIPA, with the European Free Trade Associations is a landmark in India's global outreach. Signed on March 10, 2024, it comes into effect after 16 years and 21 rounds of negotiations. At its core is $100 billion investment pledge over 15 years, projected to create over 1 million jobs in India. The pact opens new opportunities for Indian farmer, gems and jewelry, textiles, machinery, and IT services.
Trade and Economic Partnership Agreement with the EFTA countries is a comprehensive agreement which covers not just trade in goods and services, but also intellectual property rights, competition, and also government procurement. EFTA countries are important trade and economic partners of India. They had invested about 12 billion in the Indian market, and Norway's pension fund also separately invested about 25 billion in the Indian market. Since these countries are also very much part of the European Economic Area, so overall, this is an important agreement for both for the European countries and also for India.
To safeguard domestic interests, India has kept dairy, farm products, and gold outside the purview of this agreement, but Indian exporters will gain new tariff advantages in EFTA markets.
Out of these four countries, Switzerland, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway, Switzerland is the biggest trading partner to India among those four, and I think it will definitely benefit Indians and the Swiss, because it will ease imports of certain goods. In general, I think this agreement is probably, especially if you look at the other free trade agreement with the European Union, it's of psychological importance because it's good that these four countries now managed to make a deal, because we all know that for a very long time India and the EU were not able to come to a conclusion.
The agreement is also historic. It includes a sustainability clause, binding both sides to uphold labor rights and environmental standards. Bilateral trade is now projected to rise to $55 to 60 billion annually. With new tariff schedules in place, ports and airports are fast-tracking consignments, giving exporters an early edge under the new regime.
The implementation of free trade agreement between India and four European nations, Norway, Switzerland, Iceland and Liechtenstein, sets a template how cooperation can be established between countries who think alike, and set the ball rolling for other countries too. It can be a model for cooperation. Akhilesh Suman for DD India in Delhi.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Wednesday attended the centenary celebrations as the chief guest of Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh at the Dr. Ambedkar International Centre in New Delhi. On the occasion, Prime Minister Narendra Modi released a specially designed commemorative postage stamp and coin highlighting the RSS's contributions to the nation. Founded in 1925 in Nagpur, Maharashtra by Dr. Keshav Baliram Hedgewar, the RSS was established as a volunteer-based organization with the goal of fostering cultural awareness, discipline, service and social responsibility among citizens. PM Modi lauded the new Rs 100 coin featuring the national emblem on one side and a powerful image of Bharat Mata seated on a lion in Varad Mudra, as for the first time in independent India's history, Bharat Mata's image graces our currency.
100 के सिक्के पर एक और राष्ट्रीय चिन्ह है और दूसरी ओर सिंह के साथ वरद मुद्रा में भारत माता की भव्य छवि और समर्पण भाव से उसे नमन करते स्वयंसेवक दिखाई देते हैं। भारतीय मुद्रा पर भारत माता की तस्वीर संभवतः स्वतंत्र भारत के इतिहास में पहली बार ऐसा हुआ है। इस सिक्के के ऊपर संघ का बोध वाक्य भी अंकित है, राष्ट्राय स्वाहा इदम राष्ट्राय idam na mama.
All right, and the US government shut down much of its operations on Wednesday as senators have failed to pass a last-minute funding bill. The 55-45 vote in the Senate, falling short of the 60 votes needed to advance the legislation, ensured that government agencies discontinue all but essential activities such as law enforcement. This is America's 15th government shutdown since 1981. However, it is unclear how long Democrats will maintain their untenable posture, making the duration of the shutdown difficult to predict. Regardless, the employees should report to work for their next regularly scheduled tour of duty to undertake orderly shutdown activities. President Trump warned congressional Democrats that a shutdown could clear a path for irreversible actions, including cutting more jobs and programs. Trump threatened mass irreversible firings of federal workers. He added that he and Republicans are the last ones who want a government shutdown.
They are shutting it down. We're not shutting it down. We don't want it to shut down because we have the greatest period of time ever. I told you, we have $17 trillion being invested, so the last person that wants it shut down is us. Now, with that being said, we can do things during the shutdown that are irreversible, that are bad for them and irreversible by them, like cutting vast numbers of people out, cutting things that they like, cutting programs that they like. So they're taking a risk by having a shutdown because of the shutdown, we can do things medically and other ways, including benefits. We can cut large numbers of people out. We don't want to do that, but we don't want fraud, waste, and abuse.
US government shutdown will disrupt critical federal services and exacerbate existing challenges in recruiting and retaining federal employees. President of the National Federation of Federal Employees, Randy Irwin, had criticized administration's treatment of federal employees, citing intimidation, terminations, and political interference as factors undermining morale and recruitment.
Well, you know, the American people really benefit from having a talented, highly qualified federal workforce. It already is a tremendous challenge to be able to recruit and retain the necessary talent that we need to do all the important work. Federal employees make 25% less than people in the private sector doing the exact same jobs, which puts the federal government at a real disadvantage.
Thousands of federal workers were deemed non-essential and halt operations across numerous agencies, including the Internal Revenue Service, the Pentagon, and federal courts. Generally, in a shutdown, essential workers continue as normal, some without pay, but government employees deemed non-essential are temporarily put on unpaid leave. During shutdown, publication of key U.S. economic data would be disrupted, including employment and GDP reports, and affect agencies responsible for approving small business loans and disaster recovery funding. Essential services such as social security payments, air traffic control, and border security would continue, although many workers would do so without pay. National Federation of Federal Employees warned of long-term repercussions for the civil service.
Somebody knows what your politics are. There are political witch hunts happening in this government that never happened before. And so they're not, when that happens, they're not serving the American people, they're serving their political interests or what have you. And, it's going to be hard to convince a whole generation of people that would want to work for the American people. We're going to be over 300,000 federal employees will have been lost after today since the start of this Trump administration. And we don't know what our functionality of government looks like with that level of staff.
It is unclear as to how long a shutdown could last. However, the economists have warned that pressure would mount to reopen the government if a stoppage lasted for 2 weeks, threatening missed paychecks. In the past, there have been several shutdowns where operations were hit for more than one business day, including one lasting 35 days around December 2018 and January 2019 during the first Trump administration. That shutdown, also the most recent, was the longest in US history. There are major concerns of a US government shutdown impacting the country's economy. Economists say that a shutdown could reduce GDP growth by 0.2 percentage points for each week it lasts. A shutdown would also cut the flow of economic data supporting policy decisions and assessments on the economic outlook. A key concern is the closely watched government report on employment, which is due on Friday. The Department of Labor is set to pause its publication and others if a shutdown occurs. While financial markets are not usually hit hard in a shutdown, the situation could get noisier without signals from fresh economic data. The Dow finished at a fresh record on Tuesday as markets largely shrugged off due to partial US government shutdown due to a stalemate on budget talks. While Tuesday's gains were modest, the benchmark S&P 500 and the tech-heavy Nasdaq and Dow all gained for a second quarter in a row. For the S&P 500 and Dow, it also marked their fifth straight monthly gain, while the Nasdaq registered its sixth straight monthly gain. Major US equity indices veered in and out of negative territory throughout the day before finishing in fact in the black. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was up 0.2% at 46,397.89, a new record. Analysts say a shutdown will not significantly affect the US economy unless it is prolonged. Gold has hit a record high on Wednesday as the US government went into shutdown after lawmakers in Washington failed to reach deal. Gold touched a new peak of $3,875.53 per ounce as investors turned to safe haven assets on growing risks of US government shutdown. US gold futures for December delivery gained 0.7% to $3,901.4. Weak labor data has strengthened expectations of further interest rate cuts by the Federal Reserve. Asian markets took some positive cues from a stronger overnight close on Wall Street. Japanese markets lagged. A Bank of Japan survey showed improving confidence among major local manufacturers. The outcome keeps alive market expectations. The central bank could raise interest rates again as soon as this month. On Wednesday, Japan's Nikkei dropped 1% after an 11% surge the previous quarter. South Korean shares rose 0.7% after data showed rise in exports at the fastest pace in 14 months in September. Taiwan's shares also gained by 1.3%. China and Hong Kong markets witnessed arc closed for the National Day. Mainland China markets will remain shut until the middle of the next week. Indian equity benchmark indices have rebounded on Wednesday by nearly 1% after 8 straight sessions of losses. Markets witnessed firm buying in banking and financial stocks following the Reserve Bank of India's decision to keep the policy rate unchanged. At around 12:10 p.m., Sensex advanced 658.1 points to trade around 80,925.72, while the broader Nifty climbed 192.3 points to hover around 24,803.4. Japan's tariff envoy said Wednesday there were no discrepancies with the United States on the $550 billion of mooted investments by Tokyo as part of their recent trade agreement. According to the White House, under the terms of US-Japan deal lowering threatened tariffs, Tokyo will invest the money in the United States. South Korea is also on the hook for $350 billion. US President Donald Trump has said both countries will provide this signing bonus upfront. A US-Japan memorandum of understanding made no mention of immediate payments, saying that would be made from time to time. The MOU also stipulated that Tokyo would provide the necessary funding within 45 days of Washington selecting an investment area or face higher tariffs. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung said on Wednesday the country's defense budget for next year would rise by 8.2% to $47.1 billion. Lee made the comments on South Korea's Armed Forces Day, highlighting the importance of self-defense capabilities, adding that peace would only be possible on a strong foundation of security. Lee said next year's defense budget, with its significant increase, would be focused on investing in cutting-edge technology like drones and robots. Lee said that peace would only be possible on a strong foundation of security. He said the country's defense spending was already 1.4 times North Korea's gross domestic product. And U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau stressed the critical role of skilled workers of foreign companies investing in the U.S. at the first working group meeting on new visas for South Korean companies. The meeting by senior Senate Department and South Korean Foreign Ministry officials aimed at improving U.S. visa programs for South Korean businesses were held in Washington on Tuesday. And all right, and let's go live to RBI, where RBI is holding press conference post monetary policy in Mumbai.
Together to review each and every regulation every 5 to 7 years. So while we are doing that, and while it will be a continuous process, as you are mentioning, some of these things which have come our way, we have thought it appropriate to revise them, and that's it's very important that we continuously revise, review, improve our whole regulatory ecosystem.
Thank you, sir. Next we'll have Mr. Anup Roy from Bloomberg. Anup, please.
Ecosystem.
Thank you, sir. Next we'll have Mr. Anup Roy from Bloomberg. Anup, please.
Thank you, sir. Sir, in the policy you mentioned about rupee reference rate with trading partners. Now with major trading partners, so far we have 4 rupee reference rate, and now it will be expanded. So what are those currencies? And also I wonder what will be the benchmark reference rate that you will use, and will that also increase rupees trading in the international market? Like what I mean is that earlier there used to be a cross currency like INR USD and then USD say CNI. How will you fix that?
Yeah, I think the objective is that you minimize the use of crossing currencies to get rates. That will help both our currency as well as the other currency. We are currently looking at a couple of currencies. We are looking at Indonesian rupiah as one. We are looking at AED for another. But there are a few others. We will gradually keep taking them up. About your question on how do we set the benchmark, we'll have to see. We'll have to see because there are not many active transactions to begin with. So the process FBIL has to work out, what is the best way of initiating something. This is a case where, the pricing, the reference has to be shown first, and the market has to pick up from there. So keeping that in mind, we'll have to work out ways of, how do we arrive at what benchmarks do we use for these reference rates. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. अब मैं जी बिजनेस की एकता सूरी को आमंत्रित करूंगा कि वे अपना प्रश्न पूछें.
गुड आफ्टरनून सर. सर, मेरा सवाल यहाँ पर आम लोगों से जुड़ा हुआ है, उनकी जेब से. मैं ये पूछना चाहूँगी कि पिछली पॉलिसी से लेकर इस पॉलिसी तक 2-3 खबरों ने बहुत तूल पकड़ा हुआ है. सबसे पहले तो ये कि क्या बैंकिंग सेक्टर का ये कहना है कि जिस तरह से यूपीआई ट्रांजैक्शंस बढ़ रही हैं, हमारे इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पर बहुत बड़ा एक तरह से बर्डन भी बढ़ता जा रहा है, लेकिन कॉस्ट उतनी हमारी रिकवर नहीं हो रही. तो क्या आने वाले दिनों में यूपीआई ज़्यादा बड़ी ट्रांजैक्शंस पर किस तरह की कोई फीस लग सकती है? और दूसरा एक खबर ये कि यहाँ पर बैंकिंग सेक्टर का ये कहना है कि हम होम लोन में हमारे पास घर गिरवी है या गोल्ड लोन में सोना गिरवी है, लेकिन जब हम स्मार्ट अप्लायंसेस की बात करते हैं, जैसे स्मार्टफोन हो गया, तो यहाँ पर रिकवरी पॉसिबल नहीं है. तो क्या बैंक्स उसको रिकवर करने के लिए पुराने वाले तरीके पर जा सकता है कि जहाँ पर फ़ोन लॉक हो गया अगर आपने किस्त नहीं भरी? और जिस तरह आज सेबी का एक एक्ट वैलिड हैंडल जो लॉन्च हो रहा है कि अगर मैं पैसे भर रही हूँ किसी को तो मुझे पता चल जाएगा कि ये फ्रॉड है, ये सेबी रजिस्टर्ड नहीं है। तो ऐसा ही कोई ऐसा प्लेटफॉर्म कि अगर मैं किसी को पैसे ट्रांसफर करूँ तो मुझे ये समझ में आ जाए कि ये एक फ्रॉड अकाउंट हो सकता है या मैं इसमें फंस रही हूँ।
3 प्रश्न। पहला, यूपीआई पे क्या कोई चार्ज लग रहा है? तो ऐसा कोई अभी हमारे सामने ऐसा कोई प्रस्ताव नहीं है। दूसरा, आपने कहा कि क्या मोबाइल फ़ोन को जो लोन दिया गया है मोबाइल फ़ोन खरीदने के लिए, क्या उसे लॉक करने की इजाज़त दी जा सकती है या नहीं दी जा सकती है, जिस प्रकार से अन्य गृह लोन के लिए या ऑटो लोन के लिए इजाज़त दी हुई है। ये मामला अभी परीक्षणाधीन है। हम इसको क्योंकि इसमें दोनों तरह से हमारे पास में तर्क और वितर्क आ रहे हैं, उनका हम अध्ययन कर रहे हैं। हमारा ये प्रयास है कि जो हमारे ग्राहक हैं, कंज्यूमर हैं, उनका जो अधिकार हैं, जो डेटा प्रिवेसी है, वो सुरक्षित रहे। कंज्यूमर इंटरेस्ट, ग्राहकों का इंटरेस्ट, हित, वो सर्वोपरि है। साथ ही साथ जो लेंडर्स हैं उनका इंटरेस्ट भी किस प्रकार से सुरक्षित रखा जा सकता है, ये मैटर अभी अध्ययनाधीन है।
All right, and that was the post-monetary policy presser from Mumbai. Now, time for some sports news. India kicked off the Women's World Cup campaign in an emphatic fashion, defeating Sri Lanka in a rain-curtained opening encounter in Guwahati on Tuesday. Put into bat first, India lost early wickets but managed to put 269 runs on the board after the match was reduced to 47 overs due to rain. The hosts lost 4 wickets for 4 runs in the space of 11 balls, including 3 in the 26th over, which saw them slip to 124 for 6. But Amanjot Kaur and Deepti Sharma produced a match-winning partnership of 103 for the 7th wicket. That's how Sri Lanka's target revised to 271 from the same amount of overs. They made a promising start, but halted by a brilliant bowling performance by Deepti Sharma and Sneh Rana, which saw them bundled out for 211 runs. And that's all for this edition of DD India Live, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms, and you can scan the QR code on the screen to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Siddharth Bharadwaj from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Live.